Hey Matt, how's it going? Hey, how's it going? Hi, Emily. Hi, Ben.
Good afternoon.
Oh,
Hello. I think Mia should be joining soon. Um, and just wanted to give you a heads up that we are getting closer and closer to the end of my contract, just money-wise. So we're reprioritizing where we're going to be spending my money or spending the money for me. And so I won't be joining the subgroup meetings unless there's something that really needs to be worked through. But always happy. You'll see me for a little bit at the beginning because I'll go ahead and open up the room and then it's up to you all. So
great.
bittersweet, you know?
It is. Yeah, you've been excellent to work with throughout this whole process. So thank you so much.
Thank you. No worries. But today I know that I can actually pull it up while Mia's not here yet. There were a few things that she wanted to talk about. So yeah, because we didn't have a meeting last week, we didn't make quota, so we weren't able to talk about the whether or not NGOs count for the credit. So there's still that. There is also just the questions of implementation. So what will implementation look like? There was a question about an ombuds person. So I'm not sure. That's something that she mentioned. I wasn't fully clear on what that was. Oh, no, that was about kind of just like some type of resource person. So if people were having trouble navigating the credits or didn't know who to go to, like a person that would be able to help people navigate. Um, and then also following up on metrics, specifically for if the EAG doesn't exist once the clean heat standard goes into effect, what metrics should be tracked or what should be done to make sure that it's still an equitable process going into the future. Um, so yeah, those were the things. Um, I can, okay, yeah, I see something for Mia. She says that she's coming in pretty soon. So there she is. Okay, great. So those are the things. I'm sure Mia has some things that she wants to talk about as well. But I look forward to seeing you all next week.
Sure.
All right,
Thanks, Ashira.
no worries.
So sorry I'm late.
No worries. I
No
just
problem.
kind of briefed everyone on some of the topics that you were going to pick up, but you can talk about it as well, and I'll be hopping off.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ashira.
No worries. Bye.
Yeah.
And it seems like we have a fairly small group, but definitely I will still make sure to take public comment. And if I don't get to that, please remind me. We can definitely do this informally and just take it at certain points. So thanks for meeting today. I think this is a great opportunity for us to just figure out if there is anything credit related that we would need, or marketplace related in general, that we would like to have the PUC take a look at before they draft their final rule. I think we're getting to the point where this is kind of it. I think we'll have another opportunity as a full group and probably as a credit issues group to talk about the draft rule and see if, we're noticing anything that we didn't pick up on. But, I had, things in the implementation framework, which I'm still kind of confused, like what's going to be in the draft rule or what PUC is going to tackle later. But the idea is about like consumer protection and like metrics for success, like things like that seem to be something we could work on now and then address again if needed with the draft rule. But first, before we do that, I know Ben spoke with the tag and they had some questions that it sounds like might be relevant for this group. I just spoke to Catherine, who was there, and she said that they had a few questions. So do you want to discuss that briefly, and then we'll see if there's anything we want to adopt?
Yeah. Yeah, spoke with the tag, and Emily was there, of course. Yeah, basically just presented the idea that we had, or the memo that we submitted to the PUC a couple weeks back regarding the LMI front loading. And then also I touched briefly upon what we had recently been discussing, which was the expansion of the definition of what is considered a low and moderate income credit. Where can that come from? Specifically from nonprofits, I think is what we were discussing last time. And then really some of the questions from the tag members were related to, because I was talking about the issues of like, if a obligated party was to, serve or, bring clean heat measures to, for example, a homeless shelter, that, we were opining on the fact that probably should count as a low and moderate income credit, because those organizations, then go on to serve the low and moderate income population. So folks had some questions about the OEO weatherization program, in particular, which I used to, be an auditor as part of that program, so I kind of know the specifics. So really, those are the questions I remember being asked directly. It was like, around like basically multifamily requirements as part of that program, and who's eligible to be served in a multifamily environment. I don't think there was any other, really, I think most of the questions were around that. I don't know if Emily or Matt, you remember any other substantive questions, but I think, yeah, I don't know if there's much that we need to pick up from those exact questions, but I think definitely, Jeff Wilcox would be the one to talk to for OEO related matters, and eligibility there. But yeah, overall, I think it was pretty, people received it well. I don't think there was much controversy around what I was talking about. So yeah, that's what happened there.
Yeah, Catherine did flag one thing that's kind of tangential to what I had raised with Dominic, which is basically being like, I don't think Act 18 and the use of customer is very helpful when you're talking about rental housing. And it seems like the PUC, just from what Dominic has said very informally, the PUC is aware of this, and they are gonna, address that in the rule about like, yes, we understand that renters exist and they might not be paying for their utility bill, but they're still paying for heat as part of their rent. And like, it seems like they're going to get there. I don't get the sense, and again, this is just sort of vaguely what I've heard, that they're necessarily going to deal with the sort of WAP issue of like, to be eligible for WAP, like you don't have to have everyone in the building be low income. And I don't, like, that seems kind of obvious to me, even in like affordable housing, they have market rate units and very low income units at like 30% AMI. So I think it makes sense that all of those would be considered a low income credit rather than trying to like portion out the parts of the people living in that building who aren't low income. I don't know if that, I'm just trying to think that through, like, it's a bad inclination to be like, oh, someone's going to figure this out. I don't know if it's like, I think someone will, otherwise the WAP program as we know it won't function. But I don't know if there's benefit in us as an EAG being like, you should probably get more specific about like what you mean by low income household or like low income credits generated from these types of projects. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on whether there's benefit to this group trying to tell the PUC to be aware of it. Like, I think someone will, but
yeah. I guess my thought broadly on that topic is that we want the Clean Heat Standard broadly to mesh well with existing policies. So I think further defining, if you have a 3-unit building and 2 of them are low income, right now that building would qualify for weatherization. But if the 3rd unit is market rate in that building, I think like breaking that out. Yeah, we wouldn't want to like create a whole new, basically a whole new structure. We want to mesh well with the existing policies so that, existing programs can continue on. So yeah, I don't think we really, I'm hesitant to opine on that just because, yeah, we want it to work well from the get-go and not have like the existing OEO programs, like we don't want to have them rewrite the rules. We want them to keep doing what they're doing because they're doing great work for the low-income population. So yeah, so I mean, I don't know if that's exactly what you're getting at, but yeah, I guess that's my thoughts.
I agree with Ben. Yeah, I think that I agree with everything Ben said and support maybe not adding clarification if it tends away from the current definitions in existing programs like OEO.
Yeah, the only thing I guess I would add is that, if you are installing a, for example, doing a fuel switch system in a 3-unit building, again, with the example that let's say one of those units is market rate, the other 2 are low income, if that heating system serves the whole building, you're not going to be able to, shut off the heat or something for the market rate unit. It's a package deal, and I think it's more of a property basis. So yeah, I would
the WAP program gets that. Like it's just going to be hard to figure out like which weatherization goes to like which parts of the building, and like I think people have recognized that that's going to be a challenge. I don't think the what we've heard so far has meant to exclude that possibility. I think it's just rather that I'm not seeing that anyone has specifically said like, well, what about this scenario, and like would you treat that as an entire low income credit producing project, or would you have to prorate it like somehow? I think there's 2 ways. One, we could stick this into, I mean, it's not really relevant, but we could stick some version of this into the LMI institution's memo and just say like, also like, make sure you think about this because this is going to come up. Or we could wait until the draft rule comes out and says like, you didn't speak about this, and this is going to cause confusion in the marketplace if you don't come up with some sort of explainer for like which projects count. I think it's like, was WAP like 50% of units or something?
It's 2/3, I believe.
2/3. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, with the qualifier that Jeff might have the most updated rules, but to my knowledge, it is 2/3. Yes.
So I guess in terms of the address it now and then wait and see and make sure to address it later if it's not addressed. Do any of you have thoughts on how much we should be jumping on this right now?
Tempted to wait and kind of react to what's in the rule. Personally, I think what we're discussing last time is really broadening the definition of that low and moderate income credit to include those NGOs that serve specifically low and moderate income individuals, which I think is both important, both to ensure that low and moderate income populations can, further benefit, I kind of think about it as the example of like putting a heat pump in a homeless shelter, if it previously had no cooling, for example, now all those folks are now can benefit from, efficient cooling while they are in the homeless shelter, which is good for health and etc. I think that is also going to benefit obviously that population, but also, the obligated parties are going to have, broadening that definition will help the obligated parties meet their low and moderate income goals.
Mhm.
Because we know that serving the low and moderate income community through energy efficiency measures is already difficult. So I think making sure that the program is as equitable for obligated parties is also important to consider. So I guess I'd wait to see how the PUC frames that, and we should opine on kind of what we've already discussed. And then depending on how it's kind of laid out, defined in their draft rule, full rule, then we might want to go back and just suggest some wording changes and maybe further definition if needed.
I support that. On a higher level, thinking about process and the draft rule coming out, I can see a lot of things coming up like this that we'd want to respond to in just credit issues, but non-credit issues for the larger EAG or other subgroups as well. So maybe we can have like a list or some sort of note that we can make sure when the draft rule comes out, we come back to this to react to. And then, yeah, maybe that's just something EAG members can start to do is think about like what we may want to focus in on the draft rule, because I can see this group and the larger group getting pretty overwhelmed with what to respond to in the limited time we have writing the report and when the draft rule comes out.
Yeah,
That's a great
I
idea.
can totally see that. Yeah, I do think there'll have to be some sort of division of labor. And this group has, I think, thought a lot more deeply about like the specifics of credits in the marketplace. And I think the wider group has had a chance to really ponder. So I think we can yeah, just put this in our list of things to take a look at, and we can try to, our agenda's pretty rough next week with just a lot of stuff, but we can just mention that like this is coming out, so think about kind of like how we're going to want to deal with this as a group and what parts we can sort of, I don't know that there is going to be much that the other groups that we have existing are going to be able to tackle, but we could create a new subgroup if we had to, if we felt like we weren't getting if we felt like we needed a group to tackle something specifically. I'm trying to think of what that would be, but I think this group is going to be most well poised to get into the specifics of like definition of what's a customer and things like that. And yeah, I agree. I think Ben alluded to there could be other stuff that we think that they're missing the mark on or need to provide more details, which I think is the most likely rather than a mistake, just a not clear from what's in there. So we'll put that on the list of things to go over, and I think we can just move forward with the DDA qualifications memo and the LMI institutions memo, and hopefully get the group to read that ahead of time and sign off on those, because we won't have a ton of time for discussion in the full group. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, ideally both would be, I think the PUC is going to come up with the RFI and then the RFP like pretty soon. So it's kind of a question of whether we can get the DDA memo done for that. And then the LMI institutions thing should be, released so that they can theoretically incorporate it into the draft rule. So fingers crossed on that.
Right.
So,
yeah, because I was just going to say, once that draft rule comes out, it is probably going to be incumbent upon us to really start diving into that and analyzing it from an equity lens. So yeah, I agree that kind of nearing the end of like making recommendations to include in that rule. So
okay, that sounds good. Matt, before we move on, did you have anything you wanted to?
Yeah, I apologize. I had to take a quick call. Did Emily talk about the tag a little bit? About the
Little bit, yeah.
discussion tag?
Yeah,
I
so
just wanted to sort of tack onto the ongoing discussion in the
Mhm.
filing that I just did this morning, which relates to credits, because the central point of this is that we're thinking about how, whether it's a homeless shelter or a nonprofit or anyone can have access to the credits that they can then monetize, because there's the value, right? Same thing with fuel suppliers or heating contractors. We're all trying to figure out how this work that is done, this equipment or service or low carbon fuel that's installed, becomes a credit that you can monetize, that fossil fuel companies that bring in fuel into Vermont will want to purchase. And we're making some progress, but I just want to point out that under the existing system for credits earned January 1, 2023, the point was made by an employee of the Vermont Energy Investment Corporation, not Emily, that in fact those credits are owned by the Vermont Energy Investment Corporation because they provided an incentive in order for someone to install a piece of equipment or have weatherization. So if I installed a heat pump in my home on January 1, 2023, or up until now, and I received a rebate from Efficiency Vermont, that rebate was shown on my invoice. The contractor passed it through, but it was the wholesale supplier that received the money. That's called a midstream rebate. It's a very efficient way to do it. However, the consumer, when the money changed hands with a midstream supplier like at FW Web, that environmental attribute is owned by Efficiency Vermont. So it will be very challenging if that is the stance that VIC takes. And I think there's room for negotiation here for anyone to monetize credits if the credits are owned by the entity that provided the upstream rebate for that piece of equipment. This is really important. And I think we're having really important discussions about equity. But if one entity owns all the credits by virtue of providing a midstream rebate, then the contractor does the work, and the consumer that pays the money, they're left without anything. And that fundamentally needs to be addressed. Maybe not at the EAG, but the EAG should be aware of it, and the TAG and the PUC should resolve it. Because if there's no incentive for a contractor to install an air conditioning compressor versus a cold climate heat pump, they make the same amount of money. Where's the economic incentive? There's no economic incentive for someone to install that device. Why is it happening? So I think this needs to be resolved. I just want to bring your attention to it and attention to my 9-page filing that I did this morning.
I've not yet read that, but I'm looking forward to. Sometimes there's a delay in filing occasionally. So maybe it hasn't been posted yet.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
haven't seen it posted yet. Sorry, Mia.
Oh yeah, I was saying the same thing. I think I posted something once and it showed up like 3 days later. So I don't know what's going on with that. But yeah, I mean, I think that's something we can talk about with this group. I think it definitely, for me, I mean, there's the issue of these sort of existing credits, the early action credits, and then what's the policy going forward. And those have, you know, such different structures and potentially different impacts on households that I think you have to be kind of deliberate in which you're discussing. In terms of the early action credits, I guess I'll just say, you know, my personal opinion is it's going to be hard to get those benefits back to households either way. Like there's not really a great way of kind of getting back to transactions that have already happened from a practical standpoint. So at least to me, for the early action credits, it's hard to do the sort of household level you know, equity analysis if no one is seriously contemplating getting back to those individual households and providing some sort of tangible benefit. That's where I'd kind of stand on that one, whether, you know, it's kind of something we have the power to try to change at a household level, but I don't know. I don't know what else to do with that. I see what you're saying, Matt. I just don't know in terms of what the EAG could recommend.
Yeah, I don't know either. I just wanted to bring it to your attention. I mean, the contractor community, and I go to see all of them. I just travel around the summer and go into their kitchens and living rooms, and I say, "Show me your clean heat credit transfer forms." And they show me their baskets full of them. They have coffee stains on them. They're torn and ripped. They have signatures, but their consumers assigning the credit over to the person that installed that piece of equipment, and we'll deliver a U-Haul truck full of them. if this passes, and someone's got to figure out which ones are valid and which ones are not.
Yeah, I wish that had been made a little bit more clear at the beginning. I mean, this was foreseeable that this would be a complicated problem to solve when they raised the idea of early action credits. So yeah, that's messy. Is there appetite to continue this discussion with the group, or have people said what they want to say? I'm open to however we want to address this as a group.
I mean, I guess it's not specifically related to the early action credits, I guess just credits in general. In thinking about, I guess just the credit issues broadly, I was kind of reading back through the statute, which I've read dozens of times already, but I always find little nuggets in there. So that section 8124A4 on the basically good cause adjustment. Good cause could include a shortage of clean heat credits, market conditions as identified by our potential study, and there's a line in there that says undue adverse financial impacts on particular customers or demographic segments. And it struck me that I don't know what systems in place to evaluate, what demographic segments would be adversely impacted. Because and when it calls out specifically demographic segments, we're not just talking about low-income individuals. Now we're talking about just broader demographic segments in Vermont. So where my mind immediately went was to credit tracking this issue broadly. It's like, are we going to need some sort of way to track what demographics are being served throughout the program? I don't know. This was something I noticed like yesterday, so I haven't had a ton of time to kind of mull it over, but it's like, well, asking obligated parties to record the demographics of their customers, I think is a very heavy lift. That's, as you just noted, Matt, we're talking about thousands of people. It's one thing to get them to sign off a form saying, yes, I got a heat pump installed, etc., but to ask them to fill out what their demographic identity could be invasive. There's privacy concerns there. So I do think, I don't know in terms of how the EAG, how we'd want to tackle that, but I do think we might want to kind of opine on that for the commission to consider, because if if it's in there that, they have to assess, undue, impacts on demographic segments, how are they going to do that? It's beyond low and moderate income Vermonters. So it's just something that I kind of noticed in there. Yeah, Emily.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer, but I'm glad you flagged this. I just wanted to share some high level information. There are folks that I can bring in with more details, but I know that Efficiency Vermont doesn't have like email lists and a lot of information saved on low and moderate income customers in different demographics that we work with due to those privacy concerns. And yeah, just the appropriateness of taking information. So yeah, support everything you just said, and maybe I don't have a good answer, but also
Because
feel concerned. Yeah.
It's directly tied to the issue of, adjusting annual requirements. So I think to do that, they're going to need some pretty granular data. If we're talking about specific segments of the population, to assess that. So I think that at the very least, I think the equity advisory group should flag that for for the commission to consider how they might want to either further define. Speaking of, how the draft, ruling is set to come out in October, the draft, full rule. that's something they're probably going to need to either further define, clarify somehow, as to what, basically is meant by that exact. I mean, I feel like it's pretty clear, but it needs to be addressed somehow. So I
I
think
don't think it's pretty clear. I think
mean,
you're right to flag it, but I don't think it's pretty clear. I mean, yeah, so like legitimately, like survey data is going to be very slow to filter in and figure out like if it's actually caused by the clean heat standard or like anything else. So like, energy burden and stuff is not going to be like really easy to tie to the clean heat standard, except maybe after like a decade or something. I wonder if they meant something like, when all the credits are in, they found that I guess I don't even know what the credit, if it was like renters or like measures went to certain groups. I don't think we'll necessarily have that information. You could say like, I mean, I'm not even sure this would be true, but something like credits are associated with people who have specific fuel types or something, and maybe you can notice like, but that's still an inference that they've been specifically harmed by it. I mean, it's a bad thing if customers with X fuel type didn't see any benefits of these measures, but that's still not as direct as they're implying in terms of adverse financial impacts. So I just don't know how you would be able to tell very definitively who's being, within the period they're identifying, that you'd be able to say that anyone specifically is hurt, like, and support that with data,
the only,
like,
to my knowledge, the only information we're going to have is, whether a credit is low and considered LMI or not. And that's, so that's about as far as we could go down that path. So I think it's something we should definitely just raise if we're speaking of issues to kind of revisit for the draft ruling. So just wanted to raise that. Don't necessarily think we need to really further discuss it because I don't know what to do about that one. But
I do think, I mean, one of the things I wanted us to do in this meeting was to start thinking about, I don't know if it should be incorporated in the draft rule or not, but like what the post clean heat standard implementation looks like and like what we're going to ask the PUC to do to monitor this. So that's definitely relevant. I just don't know like how you ask people to do that.
So my quick answer to that one would be Act 154, the Environmental Justice Act, or law. That got pushed back in its implementation. It's not gonna, to my knowledge, it's not gonna roll out till 2027, I believe. But yeah, so that, in that is basically the requirements that all state implicated state agencies and departments, need to do an assessment of their, of all the essentially their portfolio of what they're in charge of and assess it for, environmental justice. So I think if this is passed, if implemented, the EJ law, Act 154 gets rolling, I think they would probably, moving forward, considering the Equity Advisory Group is going to be dissolved on January 15th, that would then, basically the existing, interagency environmental justice groups and Act 154 would essentially take over, and the commission would be required to kind of assess the clean heat standard in that lens. That's my understanding, and that's like a very boiled down explanation of what's going to happen there. But there are already groups in existence that could essentially take over what we've been doing.
Point of clarification, I don't think we disband until Act 8, until the clean heat standard is passed. I think our report's due January 15th, but we don't cease to exist until it is enacted. That's what I thought the language said.
Okay.
We should check on that though, to be sure what we're
we should
yeah.
Well, I can look at that here in a second, but yeah. I think it would then, the responsibility to assess equity and environmental justice of the the clean heat standard would fall on the already existing groups and laws that have been passed. That's what I was basically broadly saying.
No, I agree. Just to clarify, I think I found it in the text. It does say that the EAGs shall cease to exist when the initial clean heat standard rules are adopted. Thereafter, the issues described shall be reviewed by the commission in accordance with the law. So
thank you for correcting me. Yes.
but I get your point. I mean, that's a little nitpicking, just that I think we're kind of locked into this and, I think we can meet less during the session, but technically we still exist. Yeah, and I think with the shall be reviewed by the commission, kind of what you were saying, like we've kind of gone back and forth, and this is probably something to bring back to the group, like should the EAG continue meeting through some sort of implementation period? I think there was kind of general agreement that someone should be taking a look at it, but that's a commitment to ask EAG members to sign on to. I don't know if we feel like the commission is equipped to sort of do the type of analysis. I mean, they're certainly deeply steeped into regulatory issues, but don't necessarily have the backgrounds that, this group brings to this work. So we talked about, I think, I'm trying to remember where the tag continues to exist. Let me see if I can find what their rule says. Let's see. Does it just not say?
I'll fact check this, but my understanding, without citing statute, which I can
That's
in a
fine.
minute,
It's fine.
was that it just exists after the rules are adopted.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like what I'm seeing at a very quick look at Act 18. Doesn't really seem to say either way. So I guess it would exist until someone changes that. I think we had kicked around having the EAG sort of exist, either indefinitely, which I don't know that we all want to do, but or kind of until like things seem to be sort of running with this, or we could ask someone besides the EAG, like like the Climate Council or someone to be responsible for assessing what's going on. I think we have options, and it's just the appetite of this group. So let's discuss, Matt.
Yeah, I would not advocate for the Climate Council. The Climate Council is a very skinny group of people that, no.
I threw it out there as
they refused to set a fuel dealer who for the last 18 months, and they're supposed to be a statute be on it. So I don't. The EAG really should be doing its work after this rule is passed, quite frankly, because that's the only way to really test it is have an independent body of different people and backgrounds to be able to give an assessment. It's really hard what we're doing, assessing a program that hasn't yet been designed. But that's my opinion.
So, I mean, this seems like a full group thing, but we can find a time. I don't know if it'll be this next meeting to flag, like we're getting close to a time when we need to figure out a future for this group. So maybe that's something. I mean, I'm sure we could meet less often and work less intensively than we have been, but maybe it's the first 3 years of the program or something. I don't know what that would make sense. We could leave it to the legislature and just say for an appropriate implementation period or something. I don't know. Let's bring that to the group. I mean, definitely let me know if you have any thoughts, but this seems like a full group buy-in kind of thing.
Sure. And I mean, it's really about just because I would hate to see it just kind of that, EAG dissolves and then, equity all of a sudden is no longer considered like that. To me, it, if there's any program that needs to, and we need to ensure equity for all parties, it needs to be this one. We need to, just for the good of the people, you know what I mean? But, so there needs to be a clear handoff if there is going to be one. So.
Okay, we'll bring that up for the group about, what that period of time would look like. And I think there's an opportunity to sub on people if people don't feel like they could continue this for another couple years. But that would be something to think about. Maybe if that was the case, we would ask the legislature to make I mean, I think right now the criteria for membership at the EAG is pretty broad. Like yeah, I guess we could see if that would be something we need to take a look at as well. Because it says like member of X agency, and I don't, that might be a barrier to getting people to support this if they're,
Right.
agency doesn't want to or
So
whatever.
potentially it's something we get, some sort of amendment or something, basically just change the wording around to, I guess we'll see, it's sort of TBD, but yeah, I think we do need to take it up with the full group just to get some thoughts.
Mhm. Yeah, okay. I think that will definitely inform that. And I think flagging the language that you flagged, Ben, about, what this whole good cause and undue adverse financial impacts, like how would we assess that, or how would anybody assess that? And like, what do we do with that charge? And what's the best way to make sure that the spirit of that is honored while not potentially having great data on it. So
It's
yeah.
to me, it's a data question. Where's that data going to come from? How's it going to be collected? Who's collecting it? Yeah, those are much broader questions. I mean, it'd be easy to just say, "Oh, obligated parties are going to collect it," but for the reasons I stated earlier, I don't think that's going to work. So
You could do some stuff. I was just thinking about like pricing and like different group, but I don't think that neatly matches a demographic, or maybe manufactured homes or something, but someone would have to collect that data, and then you'd have to somehow figure that it's not like due to like global like oil shortages or something. Like I think it's going to be really hard to come up with data in the short term. And I feel like the legislature just put this in as like, oh, that's a nice thing to have, without figuring out who's going to do that. So
I agree.
okay, but we should flag that, because that is in Act 18. It says the commission, may do that. Do we want, so I mean, this seems like the most obvious one, but I think at some point we had kicked around the idea of like coming up with some sort of metrics for how we or somebody would sort of assess equity going forward. We have our rubric. I mean, I think like if this was done really well, you'd figure out like what is the adoption of clean heat measures among renters or people in manufactured homes, but like the data and tying that with the clean heat standard specifically is going to be very challenging. So like somebody should collect metrics on the impact, but I don't know who or how that's practical.
Mia,
Mhm.
that's a really important point. I hope people take that to heart. The way we've established existing rebates make it very challenging to do that. Other states, New York is a prime example. When you go into the New York database, you can see not only when someone installs a heat pump, for instance, as just one of the many clean heat measures, you can see what type of home, how many square feet. You can see what other heating equipment was in there. You can see whether it's a single split or multiples, whether it was a ducted system or not. I mean, they have an amazing. A colleague of mine in New York showed me what they have collected, and I thought, oh, this is really helpful, really useful. We don't have that, and I'm not sure who would collect that or how to change that structure to make it easier, but it is achievable. It's just we're we've done things slightly differently, so I don't know how easy it is to get.
And I think that would go down to the equipment installers / the EUs in terms of, I'm just thinking of like literally how would you go about doing that? Like someone's going to bear the compliance burden of doing that if that were asked, I'm just trying to think of what that looks like in practice.
Yeah, who collects it? Who's the? I mean, figuring out. I mean, you could tie a rebate or incentive to the making sure you have all that information, but figuring out what information you need, and then where's the server essentially, or the cloud? Who's storing that? Is it the department? Is the PUC? Is it I don't know. Efficiency Vermont? I don't know.
I saw Alex raise his hand. I think we can be informal with public comment if hands are raised. Alex, did you want to say something?
Oh, I'm sorry, that was a mistake.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, I mean, we do have some stuff with tier 3, and that's like some of this is already being tracked, but mapping that onto the clean heat standard and theoretically doing this at a much larger scale has been done does kind of call into question whether you can just like layer it into what's being done and expand it. I don't know if that's super feasible. I mean, like WAP collects some of this data.
They
you know,
collect all that. The data that Matt just listed, that's all collected
Mhm.
in the weatherization program, but of course that's all low income specific and 100% incentivized, et cetera. So it's sort of a different bar. And I think the program you're talking about, Matt, is like NYSERDA, I believe. So that's like, an industry, basically they're the folks, to my knowledge, it sort of is like an efficiency Vermont situation where I would equate it probably to like the energy efficiency network, where those basically they're getting in return for being as part of the energy efficiency network, through EVT, they're getting services, and market uplift, all the things that comes along with being a part of that network. So maybe it is something that is considered to be, to data for a midstream rebate is collected somehow, like on the project verification form. I don't know, that would be a little bit outside, but that would just basically be a means to an end to gather the data on what's occurring. I in digging through the statute again, I think it was a couple days ago, under there is a section, let's see, it's 8127. I believe it's towards the bottom. 8127H, where the review of consequences. So that it says the commission shall biennially assess harmful consequences that may arise in Vermont or elsewhere from the implementation of specific types of clean heat measures, and shall set standards or limits to prevent those consequences. The consequences could include, public health, deforestation, etc. So maybe the answer to your question, going back, is the commission. It should be, if there's consequences, adverse impacts on a demographic segment, I think that could probably be couched into the, review of consequences that the commission has to do every 2 years as part of the program. That seems like the most obvious place for me, where that could be included. Yeah.
I think in that section though, it's specifically, I do remember this coming up a bit when Act 18 was discussed. That doesn't talk about like economic consequences in that section. Like, I mean, public health is like a household level issue, but some of that takes us out of EAG territory. Like, that seems to be doing something else to me.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point, because it does say environmental burdens. Of course, that's not energy burdens, but potentially maybe if we are talking about an amendment or someplace to try to get at like who's going to collect that data, who's going to be responsible for assessing like these demographic segments, maybe the wording of that review of consequences section is reworded to include economic harms and gets included in the biennial assessment from the commission. Seems like a logical place because it's already sort of carved out in there that they will be doing that every 2 years. So to broaden from more of an environmental assessment and public health assessment to also include an economic impacts assessment. I know that it seems like already kind of like a broad, there's a lot to be considered there in that review of consequences. I would hate to kind of add on top of that, but that is the section of the act where review of consequences occurs. So,
and I guess that goes back to, do we think the commission is best placed to do that, or the EAG, or someone else? I mean, I think it's, from my perspective, it's fine if the commission studies deforestation. I think we might have different opinions about whether, discussing the impact on manufactured home residents is the same thing, and if that's the same skill set, I don't know. I think it's an open question.
for sure. The committee that comes to mind is the Interagency Environmental Justice Committee, which was created specifically to guide and coordinate the Act 154 implementation of that law, but it exists. So, again, kind of in keeping with the theme of trying to not like reinvent the wheel to mesh with the pre-existing initiatives. I think, this is sort of like end game and like ironing out the wrinkles here, but like that seems like potentially something that could be discussed if we're talking about who's going to take over equity responsibility for this if implemented, etc. So again, I don't think we need to like fully come to a conclusion now, but there are some existing, committees and like Act 154, for example, the law, that's all this is, if implemented, this is going to fall under the umbrella of Act 154. So it might be duplicative to have an EAG for clean heat standard and then also have a environmental justice committee for everything else. Just kind of throwing stuff out there, but this is sort of where my mind goes on that one.
And I think we can take that to the group, and I think you could have it both ways. You could say like EAG should exist for 3 more years, and then it should be handed off, assuming things seem to be going well, to this other group, like something like that. I think that's an option rather than we're locked into this forever, or we stop on, whenever this passes into law, so next June or whatever it would be.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we could. I think there's flavors of it that the full group can sign off on. But I mean, I am getting stuck like in terms of metrics and how you would tell whether this is successful or not. Like, I don't know that we are going to have data. Like, I think if it's overwhelmingly negative, you'll have consumer reports, you'll have like really high prices, but unless you set like X percentage in price increases, like it's all kind of just like, how does this feel to people, which is real, but hard to set any sort of standards associated with it. And, and I think we'd like to say, like, if we're not seeing adoption of measures delivered to certain household types, that's a problem. But then we get back to, there's no way of making sure under what we have now that those measures are delivered to anyone in particular besides these groups, which we should see the low income credits delivered. Otherwise, people aren't meeting their obligations, which I guess is like a separate issue of like it just not baseline working. So I don't know. I mean, maybe this is a full group discussion about like what you would be able to reasonably expect this program to be evaluated on in the future. I don't know.
And I know in the next full group meeting, we will be discussing environmental justice. So maybe that comes up in that discussion.
I think that would be good. Yeah, I think maybe that's a question we can ask Claire about, like, we're a little stuck on how you would evaluate this program with what's reasonably available. Could you opine as much as you're able to on like what that might look like? Yeah,
and she does have a lot of perspective on environmental justice and equity as it relates to current Vermont energy policy. So she, I haven't asked her that myself, but she would probably, if she doesn't know the answer, she'd know who to talk to. Let's put it that way. So I'll be able to offer some nuance and perspective to what we're discussing. So I think it's worth, that's why I'm excited to have her come chat with our group, kind of baseline our knowledge on environmental justice. So.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I think we can think about this more systematically, and maybe we'll get some thoughts on how we should be thinking about some of this stuff. So yeah, I think that's fine to table it, but yeah, I don't know that we'll have anything within the draft rule. So I think that's probably fine.
I think we're sort of in a position where we kind of have to be reactionary on that one. I think it's sort of, wait and see what the draft rule says. And then at least to that end, we will, I think the commission will take kindly to any, recommendations that our group has, specifically on that, so, because I see it as it's going to be a primary responsibility of ours to not only produce a final report for the legislature and for the public on it, but also just assessing that final submitting formal comments on that draft ruling. I think as under the full equity advisory group, is going to be. I see that as really central to what we're here for. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for comment, I think, considering there's going to be the whole thing to digest all at once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one thing that I did wonder if we wanted to weigh in before the draft rule, with the caveat that things are already in motion, is we've touched on consumer protection in our earliest credit issues or credit ownership discussions. I mean, I know people have had some good ideas about like an ombudsperson. I can never say that word. I don't know where that person works. Do they work for, and I'm not saying anything specifically, but like they could work for the PUC or the Public Service Department or the DDA, and you could have someone mediating some of these issues on behalf of consumers. That seems like a good idea. I don't know if we want to get more specific about like what this person should do. I mean, it was just thrown out, and I think it's like a good idea, but we need to do something with it if we want to.
Right. Can you just kind of, for my own understanding, define like what an ombudsperson would do? Like, that's basically an advocate for the public? It's kind of a
I mean, I don't even know. Like, I think Jen brought this up, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. So we could ask her. But like, what if and again, we don't want to have this person not have a job. But I'm thinking about like what happens if I am a consumer and I never signed off on the clean heat credit transfer. Like, I don't really know what you do with that information. The other thing, which takes us into even further territory, is like I had a heat pump and it was installed inaccurately and it's caused all sorts of problems. I mean, that's a more consumer protection thing generally, but may increase as a result of this. So I think anytime you have a marketplace, it's kind of like bad things can happen to consumers in a marketplace scenario. But again, we don't want to solve a problem that doesn't exist. It's just an idea that I thought was worth talking about.
Yeah, no, I just looked up the definition of ombudsman, and they're, a person who investigates or resolves complaints. So I'm like a market watch, like sort of person, consumer advocate for, folks participating in the clean heat, credit marketplace. I could see, considering, the Public Service Department clearly is, a ratepayer advocate, and that's largely kind of like what we're here for, to advocate. We're a mandatory party to all proceedings at the Public Utility Commission. So I could see a similar role falling upon the Public Service Department. But we're going to be verifying all the credits in the marketplace, of course. So that's anything related to credit verification issues will be in our wheelhouse, I think. That's what we're going to be responsible for. So yeah, it's a good question. It's not, it's ambiguous in the statute on that front. So.
And I guess that'll be interesting for the department to say, like, okay, so like, what if you're not just like a random consumer? What if I do like a really big project, like an industrial commercial project, and there's just a debate as to who owns the credits because things got weird with financing or rebates or something? Like, how does that get resolved? Like the ownership, the disputed ownership, like, is that do you open a case before the commission? Okay.
Yes, I guess is the easy answer. The mechanics of that, I'm not the best person at the department to answer that question, but because it's quite complicated, and we do a lot of stuff, so I'm pretty firmly on the thermal energy side of things. But yeah. So I mean, I think the idea on credit ownership, as Matt alluded to at the beginning of the meeting, is that we try to iron all that out before anything moves forward. Because there's been much talk about, parsing credits, you get partial ownership of a credit, or etc. Yeah.
And I just think like there's going to be disputes over credit ownership, even if you make the rules. Like there's going to be some weird like a super complicated large project with multiple components or something. I could envision this getting complicated beyond just rules that could be foreseen, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, those custom projects are going to be verified by the department, for their environmental or greenhouse gas saving, merits. And then the number of credits each custom project will produce will be determined by the department. And then, yeah, ownership would be kind of a separate issue. Yeah. Matt? Yeah.
Well, in some ways, maybe I'm wrong here, but in some ways, those custom projects, those CI projects, which have that another layer of verification, but also have, potential big impact in terms of greenhouse gas reductions, are more verifiable than, for instance, a heat pump being installed and 4 different entities providing a rebate and the customer wanting a piece of it and figuring out how to chop up a very small amount of greenhouse gas savings versus you go into a building and completely redo it and take out this and that. So, but those little bits add up to a lot. So that definitely needs to be resolved.
Yeah, I think it's both. I just think like there's not a scenario where you don't need, like, you need to create great clear rules, but then you're also going to have disputes.
Right. So the question being, who does the dispute go to?
Yeah, and who
Yeah.
Who
resolves it?
adjudicates the dispute?
Yeah,
I think that's Ben. That's Ben's job.
Ben specifically.
Well, I mean, I think largely, I guess the natural, plug in there would be the public service department. I think really, yeah, that's probably, we
I
are
think,
those people.
yeah, I think it's worth asking, like, who is going to do this and what's the thing, and does the PUC want to deal with a lot of cases? I mean, some of this takes us out of the equity realm, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm just thinking like we're doing some really complicated housing projects where there's like a lot going on. I think those have a pretty clear ownership structure, but like there's just going to be weird flavors of this where you've got like commercial and residential tenants in a building and different ownerships of different parts of the building. And I think there's probably a legal trail for ownership of that structure that you could follow, but like, does a lawyer need to look at the ownership agreement to figure out who owns it? Like, I'd hope that with these larger projects, there'd be a clear plan as part of like the financing, but like, I don't know.
Well, we do have our public advocacy division here at the department, which is comprised of all lawyers. So I would say that is what they do. I myself not a lawyer, so I couldn't speak to that. But yeah, I think if there was a serious dispute over like a housing project, like you're talking about for the environmental attributes or clean heat credits, from those, it would probably land in our public advocacy division and be, litigated somehow. But again, not a lawyer. So, but yeah. So I think that I think what you're getting at is like probably falls in our wheelhouse. Yes. But again, the statute's ambiguous on that. There is the review of consequences from the commission section there, but maybe that is something that the EAG recommends that, hey, we should probably include like who's the go-to entity, agency, whatever department that serves as that, that who's going to be that ombudsman basic role. So I could see that being, just the simple recommendation that be included in some kind of final ruling or final, rule would be appropriate for the equity advisory group to opine on, because that's, is an equity issue in terms of who gets what credits.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is a full-time job, and I think the average, well, it could be a full-time job with all of them, but the average like person installing a heat pump for their personal use in their home is like somewhat not likely to take this up to the PUC. This seems like more of a like you're calling the attorney general's office because you got ripped off. That's more the flavor that you'd see. But I think having a line from the PUC to internally or externally with the department saying like there's a role for people to kind of keep an eye on the marketplace to resolve complicated ownership disputes, or just sort of investigate like how can a person be connected with resources if they feel like something has happened. I think that could be elaborated on.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because I think it's sort of, I think it probably didn't get included in the statute just because it's sort of implied that the public service department is sort of the natural place to go for that. For example, rate cases, we have a role in all of those, as a ratepayer advocate, so I can see that sort of just being like an oversight of not including it, because it's like, oh yeah, like that's what the public service department does. So saying that explicitly though would be help to clarify any future. I could see that preventing a future, dispute, lawsuit, whatever it may be, because it doesn't say it. But I
Yep.
think putting it in to preempt any like drawn out, contested situation.
Well, even just information, like I think that's another question. Like, I don't know, like if I'm asked to sign a waiver releasing the credits, like who can I talk to about that? Like I don't think most people are going to be interested in having that conversation, but the PUC has not been like front facing in that way, to answer questions about like what these credits are and what a release is and what am I being asked. And I don't know. It feels like there's a base minimum of like there should be a phone number you can call to ask questions. I don't think
Right.
it's a huge public effort.
That I mean, we also have our CAPI division, our consumer and what is it, the Consumer Information and Assistance division. That said, again, it's not in the statute, and I am not the person at the department to delegate who has to do what what work. But I could also see there potentially could be a natural role for that department to handle those questions as well. Going on the theme of keeping administrative costs down and not having to like recreate a whole new department, for example, those potentially the volume of those calls might not be super high, over the life of maybe initially there'd be a lot of questions about it, but it just strikes me that that might already exist in the department, so we might not need to spend a whole bunch of extra money to build out administrative framework for that. But so
Okay, yeah, I think that's fine. I don't think this is a huge problem. It's just someone
Mhm.
should have a contingency plan for this. So, and
yeah,
I guess it gets back to, sorry, go on, Ben.
I was just gonna say I can start an internal conversation about that as to like, maybe like, is that the role that we are, because the statute is ambiguous on it, I think, maybe that is something that us at the department, maybe we're already considering that. I'll have to maybe get some information for the group. Let me put it that way.
Okay, and then that gets us back to how do we want to transmit this feedback? Is it pre-draft rule? Is it in our review of the draft rule, or is it in our final report? Do you have any thoughts on the best avenue to bring this up?
Yeah. Well, it might be the easiest to bring it up before the draft is written, or well, it's being written now, but presumably, but it also might be easier to convey our concerns or like our feedback by looking at the draft and then saying there needs to be something here that to this end, etc., rather than trying to get it. I think they are probably very busy writing kind of the draft already, and so maybe it's easier to just take that as feedback to include in a section of the draft that is yet to come. Yep.
I agree. I think because this is a detail, it shouldn't be too much lift for the larger group to just review this and push forward. I know the public engagement subgroup has talked about the hotline idea, having a phone number for customers to access. So I've heard agreement from other group members, and I think we could push this forward pretty quick.
Sure.
Okay, yeah, I agree. I think that makes the most sense. I don't think this is critical from, it's important, but it's not critical from like a design thing that's not going to impact like other parts of the framework. So I think this and the other thing that we did, the definition of tenants thing, I think we can see if it's mentioned in the rule and ask them either to add it or elaborate on it as needed. And we can, I think honestly we'll end up giving them like a laundry list of just like, here's all our feedback related to what you said, and it can be kind of lengthy. So I think that's fine. It seems like we're pretty much in agreement that it's not going to cause too many problems.
Right. Yeah, I could see us making some sort of, in our comments on the draft rule, sort of having a section like we've discussed here, like a consumer protection section, and in that would be our potential recommendations on like an ombudsman role, or like the hotline for the public to ask questions specifically about it. Like those could be in the consumer protections area, and then we'll probably have some opinions on how the draft ruling is written regarding low and moderate income populations, of course. But yeah, so I think we'll be able to probably just write one big comment on the proposed draft. So yeah.
Okay. Are we pretty much, so where this is potentially the last meeting we'll have before the draft rules comes, I mean, I guess we might meet again before it comes out, but like it's pretty big. Is there anything else that we're seeing, that really needs to be incorporated in the rule, like we want to bring to the forefront now? I'm not seeing that, but this is kind of the last opportunity we get to get into the draft, I think.
I don't think so, from my perspective. I don't know if anybody else.
I don't have anything else.
Okay, and we'll just have to leave lots of time for us to be really deliberate in looking through the text and making sure that I think this will be a lot easier when we know what's in there.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Okay. So yeah, and then, we're really gonna have to, it's a packed agenda, and I think we're really just gonna have to make sure that DDA memo and the LMI institutions memo like get voted on and ideally approved in the EAG meeting. So I don't know if there's any last minute questions, concerns about that content that we need to address or would make it better. This is the time.
Sorry, Mia, for the DDA filing.
Yep. Did you?
Has that been distributed to the larger EAG? Sorry, that's.
I don't know if it has. The share is going to include it in the packet. Well, actually, it may have been.
Been
last meeting, I think.
August. What was it? The beginning of August. I think we spent a lot of time talking about the LMI front loading memo. I don't think we had time, so it was included in there, but I don't think we discussed it enough to vote on anything. So members should have had time to read it.
Yeah, I think on August 15th, she did send it for the August 22nd meeting. You were out and that did not happen, but I think people have theoretically seen this. And
great.
I asked her to like sternly remind people that they need to read it because we're going to be voting on it. So I'll have her send it again.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah.
Okay, I will take public comment before we finish. Is there anything else that, related to any of this that EAG members want to discuss?
Nothing more for me.
Okay. Okay, let's open it up to public comment if anyone would like to make any. Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. As we reach during our regular meeting, I will call this meeting to a close and I'm going to stop the recording. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.